and we are here at the Wyckoff House Park.
It's sitting under the Brooklyn Terminal Market,
Nice.
which is still in the business of spreading produce all over Gates County. It was about 100 acres, maybe a little bit more, and that was a...
Like back then, it was all farmland here?
Oh, absolutely. I'll actually show you guys some pictures.
Okay, great.
Done with this. But this area was actually first established as a community in 1652 under the Dutch. It was called New Amersfoort. That's A-M-E-R-S-F-O-O-R-T. It's a city in the Netherlands. It was named after the hometown of the man that established this community.
Oh, nice.
In the middle of the 17th century, there was a grain famine in Europe. And all of the farms in this area were sending back just boatloads of staple grains to Europe. For about a decade, that was the primary agricultural product out here.
Okay.
Initially, there were about a dozen families that made up this community. The farm associated with this house went out in that direction. Was today sitting under the Brooklyn Terminal Market,
Nice.
which is still in the business of spreading produce. But originally, they were the shipbuilding community for commercial vessels. And that meant that not only did they have the docks going down there, but they had all of the support industries like the rope makers and the ironmongers who were making tackle and that kind of thing for the ships. So all of the industry was actually out here. And when the Brooklyn Bridge was originally built, it was not so that people in Brooklyn could get to work in Manhattan. It was so people in Manhattan could get to work in Brooklyn. One of these houses would have had its own kitchen garden.
Okay.
And that was where you grew the things that the family was going to need. Your vegetables, your herbs, your culinaries, your medicinals, your practicals like dye herbs. So all of those things would have been, and the Dutch loved their box beds. In the middle of the 17th century, science is finally being applied to farming or to agriculture of any kind, and horticulture and botany were like at the top of the list.
When you say science was applied, what do you mean by that? Everything here was grown organic, right?
Yes, but they didn't understand why things did what they did.
Okay.
They didn't understand crossbreeding. They didn't understand grafting. So almost all of the apples that are grown in the Americas are grafted. That's how you get a consistent strain. If you take the seeds from an apple tree and plant them, you're going to get a whole bunch of trees that have absolutely no relation to each other. But if you want a consistent strain like a Granny Smith or a Golden Delicious, then you have to graft those to another tree. Otherwise, it won't produce a consistent fruit every time. But they didn't understand that sort of thing yet. And that some of these cover crops are actually revitalizing the soil.
Right.
And that's why in 4 or 5 years, it's good again. So they began to figure out which crops they could plant either together or in succession that would do the same thing without having to leave the field unoccupied. So when the Dutch started building their kitchen gardens, one of the things that they did was they separated the gardens into box beds, and the box beds were not by plant type. It wasn't just all the vegetables here and all the herbs there and all the dye plants there. They were separating them by pH and sun type. So they're beginning to understand, you know, science is telling them how this stuff works, and it worked much, much better for them. So the Dutch were absolutely in love with their box beds. We've got 6 of them Out and back, they probably would have had at least twice that many, just to, you know, supply their own needs. Your farm is a monoculture. At most, you might have 2 crops that you're growing out there at a given time. But you needed to grow it in large quantity because that's what you're selling to make your living. This in the back, you know, I can tell you based on some of the records from the 17th century what a starter kit for a farm was in order to make it viable. And that was just the bare basics. You needed 4 horses, which is 2 teams of 2, because you can't work a horse every day. You needed 4 to 6 milk cows. One of them could be a heifer, but at some point she's going to have to start giving milk. Half a dozen pigs or so. There may have been a couple of goats in the area. Goats were easier to transport, but they didn't give as much milk.
Right.
And as many chickens as you could get your hands on. And that was your basic kit. You also needed a master farmer, 3 to 4 adult farm hands, and at least 1 farm boy. And that was an actual job description. They had the lighter duties, like taking the pigs out into the woods to eat the acorns, which helped fatten them up, or feeding the chickens, certainly helping to feed all the other animals, possibly doing some of the milking. The men, the adult men, were doing the heavy labor out in the fields, particularly the plowing. But at that time, they didn't really have seeding machines, so they were broadcasting the seeds. The kids would probably have helped with that.
Right.